Hello, you're listening to the Saluki Gamescast for August 26, 2022. This is episode 18. My name is Justin Young, and joining me as usual are OJ Duncan, Ryan Freels, and Alicia back for a second straight episode. This is a record.
What a concept. I'm actually here for multiple episodes in a row.
We are very excited to have Alicia back. We're excited to have everyone back because the school year has begun. We're 1 week into the new school year. How are things going for everyone?
I am so happy to be back in this semester. You know, I know the joke before has been, it's that time of the semester, but honestly, right now, I'm loving teaching. I'm loving my classes. I've got a good feeling about this semester. I'm going to be very busy, but I think it's going to be good busy. I will be exhausted, but it won't be exhausting.
It's that time of the semester you actually like the semester.
Exactly.
OJ, Ryan, how about you?
Justin, it's that time of the semester. No, I'm kidding. It's going good. Everything's off to kind of a pretty nice, smooth start. I'm teaching classes in person again, and it's pretty nice. Like I was worried I might feel out of practice or something, but no, I just kind of like went back in the role as if it was like just yesterday I was doing it. So I'm glad to be like talking to students like in person again, and I've gotten to play some good video games this week. So
great, that's good to hear. OJ,
so my workload was very, very, very front loaded, and now it's all done. So I'm ready. Like I have work to do, but it's like nice and easy, and I don't have anything like pressing all the time for me. So I'm very excited. I think this is going to be a great semester until I start prelims.
He's just rubbing it in. He's just twisting the knife on everyone else. That's just real easy. I don't know. What's everybody stressed about? We'll remember this.
When I'm tearing my hair out when I'm in prelims, you can remind me, oh, remember when you were rubbing it in our faces? Well, we don't have prelims. So.
We'll just add this to the soundboard so we can just play it whenever.
There we go. What about for you, Justin? We haven't asked you how you're doing in a while.
how are you doing?
That's right. Not everyone has asked me how I'm doing. I'm doing well. I think getting back to the beginning of the semester, sort of like you were saying, Alicia, I'm happy to be back teaching in person. I taught a couple of classes over the summer online, which I enjoy, but you don't have that same sort of interaction with students in the same way, at least, I don't think. So I'm happy to be back. It's also cool to be back and just running into people. Like, you know, I'm a big proponent of work from home. I think work from home is fantastic for a whole lot of people in a whole lot of situations that it's beneficial for. I also get the benefit of being in an office environment. And maybe that's because it's an unusual office environment in a university versus your normal cubicle work environment. And so, I have an office I can go in and close my door. And that makes it a little bit different than the situation some people are in at work. But I really like the sort of interaction with colleagues, or even just students, like running into a student in the hall, and it's a student maybe I had last year, and they stop me in the hall and want to talk about something, or I run into a colleague and they're saying, "Oh, I got that email from you. Let's talk about that." I've always thrived on that sort of interaction, and I know. What was it? Was it Monday? The three of us ran into each other out in the hall and, sat and talked for a few minutes. And I think those sorts of sort of like casual encounters with people really present a lot of creativity often in a work environment, and build those sorts of relationships and everything with people. So I really enjoyed that, and I enjoy being back in the office with that and with all the different people and the students and everything. So, there are negatives, right? It's like 90-something degrees today. It was really hot walking into work this morning, and so there are some negatives and things like that. And I actually have to get up every morning and, take a shower and get into work.
Yeah.
So there are some negatives in that situation, but there's a lot of positives as well. So, but there's also a lot of video game news. And so we're going to jump right into that and try to cover as much of this as we can over the next hour or so. So let's first talk about Embracer. Embracer went on a buying spree. They've been on a buying spree over the last couple of years, but in the last month or so, they went on a huge buying spree. They bought several different properties. We're going to talk about those. We're going to save the big one till last because it was kind of mind-shattering when it was announced. So the first thing they bought was limited run games. So if you're not familiar with limited run games, they put out physical editions of a lot of games or collector's editions of games that might have originally been released only digitally and became kind of like cult hits, little small indie games, or sometimes re-releases of games that sold out of their initial print run and people still want. So they're kind of a niche publisher and everything. So they purchased them, which when you think about everything else that Embracer has been buying up, a lot of these legacy studios, places like Crystal Dynamics and all the old Tomb Raider games, you can start to THQ, you can start to see and think about how limited run games might just tie into that very conveniently of going back and republishing some of these old games. And I would assume they would still allow them to work with other publishers, but I don't know that. And limited run games is based out of it's North Carolina, I believe, is where they are. So, they've opened up a retail store in a local mall even. So they're kind of a neat little company. The second one is a company called Singtrix, which makes vocal processing technology. So I'm not as familiar with them or their work. The third one was Tuxedo Labs. Tuxedo Labs make the game Teardown, which is currently available on PCs. Has been one of my favorite games of this year. It's a game where I've talked about it on this podcast before, but just a refresher. It's a game where the entire world is sort of made of voxels, so you can go and like tear down a wall or blast a hole through a wall and everything, and you're basically trying to make it so that you can speed run through these levels, but you get to like do all the preparation work in advance going through and do sort of like real-time deformation of the levels. So that's a really cool game, and I would assume that they might want to take their tech and give it to some of their other studios to work with. Tripwire Interactive was another purchase. They make the Killing Floor games, very popular series of first-person shooters, mostly on the PC. But the big news, the news that I thought of you instantly, Alicia, when I read this, but really shocked me because I can't imagine this being bought, but by a video game company was the last thing I was thinking. And even if it was going to be a video game company, I would have thought somebody major like Electronic Arts or something. And Embracer is at this point as big as a lot of those companies, but we still don't think of them as being nearly this big. They bought the rights to the Lord of the Rings. And I guess it's really the entire Middle Earth rights is what they've purchased. And specifically for games and film. So the publishing rights of The Hobbit and The Lord of the Rings and all the other Tolkien works, those still remain with the family and with the publishing company. So they do not have that. They're not going to be publishing new editions of The Lord of the Rings or anything that happen to have Lara Croft in them for some reason.
Oh, God.
Lord of the Rings Embracer Edition.
But this also, I guess, in part includes the television rights, but the television rights remain with Amazon for now because Amazon is producing this new Lord of the Rings show. Was it The Rings of Power?
Rings of Power.
Which actually that premieres next week, is it? It's real soon.
Oh my gosh, yeah, it does.
I think it's the beginning of September, right? That
Yep.
comes out.
Yeah, we're almost done with August.
So my understanding is as long as they continue producing that show and in seasons of more than 5 episodes or more, they retain the rights, at least in the short term. There may be an end to that at some point. But what this means is Embracer can make new Lord of the Rings films. They can make new Lord of the Rings video games. And for the most part, without very many restrictions on what they can do. Thoughts about this story in particular or any of their acquisitions? Alicia, I know you have thoughts.
I do. It's the without any restrictions that worries me. You know, the realm of Middle-earth and all of Tolkien's writings are very special to me, you know, for personal reasons, for family reasons. And I think it can be done well. I hope it will be done well because you don't make this purchase without having ideas. Like, they're going to do something with it. So I hope that they do it well. I can't even say I'm cautiously optimistic until I have any idea more concrete of what they plan to do.
Well, I know you care about the films quite a bit, you know, as well as the games. So
I care about the books. I reread the books every year. Like,
well, this doesn't affect the books directly.
Yeah, but if they have the rights to do whatever they want, they could, you know, are they going to remake games of the books? Are they going to do something completely in opposition to the books?
One of your favorite things, so don't mess with it.
Yeah.
And we should clarify, this does not give them the rights to the films that New Line Cinema and Warner Brothers made.
No, it would be to make new films.
Right. So when it comes to films, what would you want them to do, or what do you think they will try to do? Because it doesn't seem like it makes a whole lot of sense to just remake either The Hobbit or The Lord of the Rings so soon after those films, and as beloved as those films are. Do you think they make animated versions? I mean, I love the 1970s versions of those. That's what I grew up on.
Yeah.
And so I have a very soft spot, despite knowing the flaws in those. But like, I could see them making animated versions. You know, online there was a lot of speculation. Like, are we going to get a Gandalf film? Are we going to get a Strider film? Are we going to get like a Lord of the Rings cinematic universe essentially going on?
Waluigi's Gollum.
Okay, you know what? Man. That's perfect. I'm fine with that.
It's going to be like Ryan Gosling as Gollum.
I say Waluigi's too tall. Gollum's sort of a hobbit, in essence.
Okay, then Danny DeVito as Gollum.
No, I mean, for decades, people have wanted a Silmarillion film. I don't know if that can ever be properly done. I would think probably if they do new films, like you said, they'll do things like, okay, what was Aragorn's life like before Lord of the Rings? Maybe I would, part of me would want and part of me would not want for them to do like a TV show or something where they get to highlight some of the things that got left out, because even the extended editions of the Lord of the Rings films didn't cover everything.
We don't get
You just
Tom.
can't. You don't get Tom Bombadil, you don't get Haldir, you don't get the invasion of the Shire. So like I could see them doing more of a exploration of those kinds of things. I don't know. I'm in general cautious when anyone says, like, I don't even read Lord of the Rings fan fiction because this universe is so special to me in its original form. So I'm always very cautious when I hear news about new Lord of the Rings things. I'm willing to be impressed. I just can't say that I'm optimistic at this point. I'm not pessimistic beyond just the fact that my trust was broken by the second and third Hobbit movies, and so now I'm automatically pessimistic of anything.
Wow, you gave them credit to the second and third. Like, I would have said the first Hobbit film sort of broke my trust.
See, the first Hobbit film, at least, a lot of the additions there were still from Tolkien's writing and were exciting and cool and could be made to work. And then the second and third ones were just...
I will agree with you on that, because I remember I had a fun time. Like, it wasn't like the greatest movie ever, but I had a fun time during the first Hobbit movie, and after that I was just kind of, meh. It's a movie that happened.
Yeah.
But I can empathize with how you feel, because, like, if like a company, and I don't even know much about Embracer, so if a company, like, took control over, like, one of my favorite things, like Hasbro bought Neon Genesis Evangelion, I'd be like, okay. But
starring Mark Wahlberg.
I would break bad at that point.
You're going to start selling meth because of that?
I didn't mean, okay, break bad existed before the term break bad. But anyway, no, I would go to the type of angry fan that I don't like, and I would become them if I found out Mark Wahlberg was in any way involved with Evangelion. But, oh God. But, yeah, I mean, I'm just like, this could be really cool. They could fail it. It could be a mixed bag. I have no idea. Like, I don't know. I don't even really know much about Embracer. So, I don't think I've played any games that have come from them or anything. But I can empathize with you. But I mean, hey, maybe they'll do something great, like Andrew Lloyd Webber's The Silmarillion.
Oh, jeez.
And it'll be a musical like Cats. and then Tom Hooper will make a movie.
No, please no.
Would there be a butthole cut?
Oh my gosh.
That's a title.
I would actually cry and just no.
Instead of the magical Mr. Mistopheles, there'll be like the magical Gandalf. And
The orcs have buttholes in this version.
No, like you said, they could do genuinely amazing things. It could happen. I'm just not getting my hopes up.
Well, since this is a video game podcast, let's talk about it from a video game perspective. We are still theoretically getting the Gollum game. This will not cancel that or anything. That game will still come out sometime next year. It's been delayed till. What sort of Lord of the Rings games would you want to see? Or Middle Earth, we should say Middle Earth, because it could be set in a different time period or something. We've gotten a lot of different genres over the years of Middle Earth related games. Is there something you would like to see?
That's a good question. I think for me, I'm just generally a fan of like adapting what's already there rather than having to make up your own stuff in this case. And again, this is because Middle Earth and everything about it is so special to me. So I'm always very wary when people come in and say, let me make up my own version. Like, this is why I'm wary of Rings of Power. So I think I would love to see a game adaptation of the Silmarillion. And honestly, I would love to see the original Lord of the Rings games on the PS2. I think did a great job of adapting the books. Because the thing with a game versus a film, you have way more time in a game. Mm-hmm. You can give us Tom Bombadil. You can give us the Invasion of the Shire. Because you don't need to cram it into, okay, it can be done in 4 hours. People will play this game for
40 hours.
40 hours, 200 hours.
Mm-hmm. Right.
So I really would love to see where I understand where a movie or a TV show can't show every little detail. I would love to see a game adaptation of just the full story.
Mm-hmm. I think we've talked about before those PlayStation 2 games on this podcast, and those are fantastic games, or were at the time. I haven't gone back and played them lately, but at the time, they were, for movie adaptations, very good quality.
Well, and even Fellowship adapted the book more than the movie, honestly. Mm-hmm. Like, it starts off, it gives you more time in the Shire, which is something from the book, in the movie. Bilbo vanishes, Frodo gets the ring, and you got to go.
Right.
In the book, there's a 17-year span where he's in the Shire.
But there's still enough time for Bilbo and Gandalf to get lit on some pot.
Yeah, I mean, I think those are good examples. I was talking to a friend recently about this, maybe when this news happened, actually, and we were talking about Lord of the Rings games, and I said, oh yeah, well, I played like text adventure games on the Commodore 64 when I was a kid. And I had one of The Hobbit specifically, and was able to find that online and show it to them. And, you know, I feel like this is the fantasy world, right? Like this is the one that Dungeons and Dragons and everything else is based off of in one form or another. So I feel like those core stories you can definitely tell, but like even, you know, and I love the Lord of the Rings, but I'm not as passionate, I think, as you are about them, as protective, I guess I should say. But I think like even going off, like you were talking about, we can tell the story of Aragorn before he comes into this, because Tolkien wrote so much. We do know a lot about the world, even if we don't know specific stories in it. We know what was going on, and you know some of the culture and everything that can be brought into that.
Yeah.
So I feel like there are ways to explore that in a game world, you know, that lets you kind of go out and explore it. And, you know, I could definitely see something, you know, Skyrim in Middle Earth.
Yeah.
Like, because it doesn't even necessarily have to be tied to the main plot line, but like we know what this world kind of looks like and everything, and we can use a little creativity to fill in the blanks here and there, but like we can build out this world and let you explore it in a way that, you know, outside of the MMO online, I don't think a lot of the games have allowed you to do that much. You know, not since the old computer adventure games, at least.
Yeah. And I think for me, the big thing is not contradicting Tolkien. Like I'm happy to see anything that is faithful to Tolkien's work.
Any other thoughts?
I guess I agree. Like so of all the books, the Silmarillion is actually the one I'm the most interested in reading. Like I haven't read any of them, but just because Peter Jackson, like, and I want to go back and watch them, but already made some like really good films based off the books, like the Lord of the Rings trilogy. So if there's a book I'm going to read, I don't want to read that one because there's not really another version of it. So a video game version of that to me would be something I'd be really interested in, or like, you know, video games set within its timeline or something. The other thing I was just trying to think of something was like, it'd be cool to like have a game like set more like within the orcs culture and world and kind of exploring more about them. I don't know anything about the orcs, or if you're like
a very
Ryan,
interesting history that would be really cool to explore in a video game.
Okay, I was going to say, it's like if you're like, Ryan, that's awful, that's terrible. No, like I would believe you, but like off the top of my head, that sounds like, you know, a cool thing to do. So like it, you know, it could be like an RPG, action RPG type game set in there, like with one of them, and with one of them as the main characters or something.
And I think that's part of the potentiality of that Gollum game, right? That it takes a character and shows us part of the story that we don't see, that, you know, we kind of fill in maybe in our heads, fans have, but we don't actually see on the Ren page, and certainly not on the movie screen. That game doesn't look particularly great right now, but, you know, that's the promise of it, at least, right? That we're getting that. But I think that's a really good idea of like taking some of the, you know, the villains, the bad guys in the story, and like letting us see the story more from their perspective and everything. And because it is in that fantasy world, it's much easier to play with that, right? Like,
Yeah.
we can't do a World War II game from the bad guy side.
No.
But like you can do that in this fantasy world much easier.
Yeah, and there's definitely untold stories. Like, I realize I'm probably sounding like I want word-for-word adaptation from the book. That's not the requirement for it to be good. There are absolutely untold stories. Like you said, an orc game would be really cool. I just need it to not contradict Tolkien.
It needs to like acknowledge that literature. And,
yeah,
like,
it needs to not be like, guess what? This orc is an alien from Mars. You know, keep it consistent with the canon of the universe.
So not the Highlander 2 route.
Oh, God. What? Highlander 2 doesn't exist. What are you talking about, Justin?
There is the Renegade cut where they cut out all the alien stuff. So, yeah, I mean, I think the other thing that's always interesting about this, when people start talking about Tolkien and adapting any of his works is that the process of adapting them into the media that we're familiar with almost always means that you fundamentally change it. So, right, like the films, which are fantastic, like that original Lord of the Rings trilogy is I won't say it's perfect, but it's about as perfect as anybody's ever going to get that, I think, realistically. Yeah. But despite that, right, like it also has this sort of fetishism of the fighting in it that doesn't exist in the books. Mm-hmm. And, you know, like that was not something Tolkien was like particularly hung up on. And like if you only see the films, you get that impression, right? Where like Tolkien was very much sort of anti-violence. And
oh wow, I didn't know that.
What?
That was just something I didn't know. So
yeah, he fought in World War I and lost all but one of his closest friends. He was very anti-violence.
I knew he fought like in a war, but I didn't. Okay, wow, that's good. That's good to know.
So like, while I think like the PlayStation 2 games are fantastic, that's one of the things about them, right? Like it is a hack and slash game. Those 3 games, for the most part, you're just walking through levels, killing everyone, and you know that fundamentally isn't consistent with Tolkien's themes and everything in the books. Mm-hmm. Now, having said that, right, like I understand adaptation, and I understand it's really difficult to make a movie where, you know, the Battle of Helm's Deep is, and then they had a big battle, and that's basically the description in the book, and you can't do that in a film. You can't say, you know, you can't just like fade to black and go, and a battle happened. You kind of have to show something. You have to have Legolas, you know, surfing on a shield. So I think that's the challenge that they're going to happen, because I think there are the like diehard fans like you, Alicia, and I think there are the movie fans, and I think we're at a point now where there's a whole new generation that certainly never saw those films in theaters. Mm-hmm. And they're coming up, and like, how do you cater to all those audiences, you know? Whereas with Star Wars, that's a little bit easier, because Star Wars fundamentally has always been what Star Wars is. Mm-hmm. It's always been, you know, a rip-roaring adventure with shooting and sword battles and all that. You know, it was made for film, which translated very easily to video games, but literature that then got adapted to film, and then now going back and trying to take that literature and adapt it into new films and to video games, you know, just feels incredibly challenging. And we're going to talk about Hogwarts Legacy a little later, and I think that's the challenge they're having with that fundamentally those are very entertaining books that don't adapt well to video games in a lot of ways, because there isn't a whole lot of fighting in those books.
I do want to like point out that I think you, like in pointing out the difficulty, I think you also pointed out like a strong thing that they could do. And so you're talking about like how Tolkien was against violence. I think it would be interesting to do like a survival type game within the Lord of the Rings world, where you have to make choices about how do you want to address things and like what skill sets you build, which isn't undone before. You've seen stuff like what I'm talking about, like in like the Fallout games or Elder Scrolls games, like, you know, working on like your persuasive abilities versus your abilities to shoot a gun or, you know, attack with a melee weapon. And like you can play it multiple different ways, and the story happens differently depending on what you focus on. And maybe true to like what Tolkien would want to say, you could have more positive progress happen with the character if they choose to do things like try to work on peacemaking skills or diplomacy and stuff, versus if they try to like go down a path of like violence and melee, you know, being good at melee weapons and stuff. It might be interesting to explore, like, and then, you know, having to deal with the consequences of what that brings in a way that Tolkien might appreciate. I can't say what Tolkien would appreciate. I'm not him, but
right. Well, none of us can say, right? I don't know. If he were alive today, he might love like the Gollum game.
No, he wouldn't. I will say Tolkien would not appreciate any of this. He didn't think anyone other than his son Christopher could fully appreciate the Lord of the Rings world.
I want Joaquin Phoenix to play Gollum.
Oh, God. Ryan, you're trying to kill me today.
or I heard you talk about a new generation of fans, Lord of the Rings, the new generation, and do it like an 80s style, like sci-fi / fantasy thing, like in the style of, say, Captain and the Game Master or the Dungeons and Dragons cartoon.
I'm sorry, I'm just still stuck on Gollum like dancing down some stairs.
But another image you put in my head, though, I just want to bring up really quick before we move on. You talked about Danny DeVito playing Gollum. Just do the entire race of hobbits as like a race of Danny DeVitos. Have him play all of them.
I could see Danny DeVito as a hobbit. I would love that.
I want to see him as all hobbits.
I want to see him as a Sackville Baggins.
All right, we do need to move on, but we're going to move on to more Middle-earth news because Private Division, which is a studio that's part of 2K, announced that they are working on a new game set in Middle-earth. This was actually announced before the Embracer news was announced. So theoretically, this is still going through. This deal was made before the purchase was made, so whatever contracts were signed are already in place. So this will continue on. They haven't released any news about what this game is, but we are definitely getting Middle-earth games coming down the pipeline. So that Gollum game, this game, and then whatever Embracer does after this. So we won't have to wait long to start seeing Middle-earth set games. Mm-hmm. Some negative news. We actually talked about this in a podcast over the summer, I believe. A story had leaked out that some of the Q&A testers at Nintendo said that they had faced some harassment on the work job. At the time, the details of this story really weren't out there. So at the time, it really kind of came off as this was a contractor that worked for Nintendo, and that the complaints about the work environment were maybe geared towards the contractor company and not Nintendo directly. These new allegations that have come out are more directed towards Nintendo in addition to the contractor. And so basically what it is that people get hired for these contractors to do like QA testing, essentially testing the games, playing through these games, trying to find bugs and other quality issues and everything with the games before they're released. And while they're doing this and everything, they are like, they're hired on a contract basis. So they're not full-time employees, and certainly not full-time employees of Nintendo. Oftentimes when they're hired, they're kind of given the pitch that, hey, if you take this job, you might get hired on full-time at this company. And a lot of people view this, not just with Nintendo, but for a lot of game companies as a way to break into the industry. Mm-hmm. If you've watched the, what is the Apple series, Mythic Quest, they actually have some QA testers and everything, on that show that they exhibit. But for a lot of these people, this is like, I want to work in video games. I'm going to take this low-level, low-paying job, and then I'll eventually get to work into it. Apparently, people are using that to take sexual advantage of some of these employees. And where that gets into Nintendo is more specifically, apparently Nintendo has a big holiday party every year. And since these are contract employees, they're not invited. And the only way that they can get an invitation is if they're willing to go with somebody who is a full-time employee at Nintendo, which has led to apparently some Nintendo employees, this is Nintendo of America specifically, and this is not about Japan, essentially saying, hey, do you want to go to this party with me? And they do very much want to go to this party because they're still trying to break into the industry. Plus, it's probably a pretty cool party to go to, and then feeling like they're in a position of where those employees are making expectations of what they should do, what they should deliver to them because they are bringing them to this party. And so it's led to a lot of people feeling very uncomfortable, feeling like they are being sexually taken advantage of or put into positions that are sexually uncomfortable for them. Nintendo, has said, hey, we don't we have no evidence of this happening, but we're going to investigate it and everything. So they're giving kind of the standard PR line to it. But the reason I think this is interesting, one, because we've talked about this with other companies like Activision, and two, because this seems to be a prevalent issue within the game industry. An industry that has traditionally been heavily dominated by men, is still heavily dominated by men, though women have made great inroads. And we still see in the game industry a very much sort of stratification of the different levels of employment within an organization. And we've seen some of that with these QA testers, unionizing recently at Activision and everything. And I think this is further evidence of why those sorts of employees need to unionize and need to make sure that they have a stronger voice in the industry. So I don't know if any of you have reactions or thoughts on this.
I've always seen Nintendo as like a up and up company, and this kind of makes me sad. I don't know why I always. Well, I mean, they've always had like such high standards for their games and always been like family friendly stuff. So I always just kind of assume like, oh, Nintendo's such a great company. So it really, I mean, it always disappoints me when people are facing sexual harassment in the workplace. But this is like a bigger letdown than like if I heard another story about Blizzard Activision, I'd be like, oh yeah, like that's this week's news. But Nintendo just kind of upsets me more.
It's like finding out Goofy sexually harassed someone.
Right.
Like, I mean, you have that image of Disney, right? That Disney is very family friendly and very wholesome, and finding out that it's just like any other company is very disheartening.
Yeah.
Yeah. I wish that I could be like, this comes as a complete shock to me, just because, I mean, even... I love y'all. I'm the only woman who's on this podcast. Every time we talk about, if somebody's going to be gone, it's other guys in the program. So like, I am very aware of these things, and obviously you all have never done anything to make me feel isolated in that or whatever. But to me, it's a very familiar experience of, okay, well, you want to go to this thing and you're not technically invited, so of course some guy is going to ask if you want to go as his date, and what do you do then? And just all of that awkwardness. I'm glad to know that it's, I guess I shouldn't say I know this because I don't, but from what I'm hearing about this, it sounds like it's more of, okay, these are just random employees rather than, the CEO is creating a sexist environment. So I do have some sense of relief that it's lower level than, say, like Activision, where we're hearing about it all the time with everything. But I can't say that it surprises me that any company, even one that I have long held in high regard, like Nintendo, I can't say that it surprises me that your average everyday office worker is on either side of this, whether doing this to someone or experiencing it.
I will note that we have replaced you with a woman before, so when
we
you weren't
did
here, yeah.
Jody.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah, so we definitely have women to replace you with. If we ever need to replace you.
Sounded totally feminist.
We have binders of women. We can just flip through and find a replacement.
By the way, the new person in charge of this podcast, Mitt Romney. Just thought we'd bring that up.
Oh, jeez. And again, I really do like that. That's not meant to be a comment on you guys at all. It's just
we're joking. But I mean, I think it does get to a bigger point that when you note that this is something that happens at any company, and it kind of makes the point, right? Like Nintendo is not exempt from this. No company is exempt from this. And, in the same way that, we try to do this podcast very openly and welcoming to people. But something like that could happen here. And I think the people here work very hard for it not to.
Yeah.
But, even something like this situation, could have negative things happen and everything. And that's why you have to be sort of proactive, hopefully, in it. And I guess that's the hope that Nintendo will take this as an opportunity to address this, not only right now, the people who have committed these violations, but to, in some ways, make it preventive for in the future so that similar issues do not happen in the future. And then also other companies where this is not happening, right? So I think that's the problem. A lot of times these human resource issues feel like they're always reactive rather than proactive. And this seems like the sort of thing that Nintendo could have put an end to much earlier had they been more proactive with it. Let's get to some happier news. Some news is important to go over, but it's it can be a bit of a downer. Multiverses was the top-selling game in July. That's notable because Multiverses is a free game.
We love to hear it.
And yet it still was the top-selling game. So they did put out a Founders Pack for like $40. That was the top-selling game in July. So even though you could get this game entirely free, people were still buying this expanded version, which offers more costumes and characters and things like that. That, I think, is a very good indication of just how popular this game is right now.
That is crazy because, I remember we talked when the trailer first premiered, and we were all like, "We're a little wary. Like, what's going to happen here?" And now it's just blowing up and doing phenomenal.
I'm looking forward to trying it. I haven't gotten it yet, but this actually, I don't necessarily expect it to be as good. But I haven't played Super Smash Bros. For a long time because for a while I've mostly been doing single-player games.
Sure.
But, I'm going to go ahead and try this out with some friends. And in a way, I'm actually more interested in this than, even as good as the current Super Smash Bros. Was. I'm more interested in this just because of, how wild it is that, some of the characters they're bringing into it. There's just another, level of, whoa, this is just ridiculously cool and strange. Just seeing, Steven Universe characters with DC superhero characters, with Game of Thrones characters, with Looney Tunes characters, and just the fact that it's free. You can spend money on stuff on it, but the fact that it is free, you can just play it for free if you want. I just think this is really cool.
Yeah, I think it has been really surprising how big this game has taken off because, when that first trailer came out, we all did kind of react to it like, oh, another one of these. And, the fact that it turned out to be actually good and people are embracing it has been very surprising.
Didn't pull a Nickelodeon on us.
No, sadly, that Nickelodeon game, not quite the game that people wanted out of it.
I never had faith in that one. And
there was a second I thought you were saying, no, sadly, it did not pull a Nickelodeon. And I was like, aren't we happy that it didn't pull a Nickelodeon?
I mean, look, I care more about Garfield than I do most Warner Brothers characters. So maybe Garfield can be a guest character in Multiverses. I don't know.
Also, I did read that some of the characters, I was like, it'd be cool if these characters showed up in it, are going to possibly be in it. Animaniacs, I think, are possibly going to be some of the next characters added to it. So,
yeah, I think the rumors have been Beetlejuice and the Wicked Witch of the West are new characters coming soon. And I think both of those are pretty cool characters. Like Beetlejuice specifically, because I can imagine you're going to get that, that snake version of him in it. So that should be fun.
There's so many hero fighters in this. I'm glad to see the DC characters, but I'm glad they're also adding other stuff too, because that to me is more interesting to see something like, oh, the Wicked Witch is going to be in it, or oh, Garnet from Steven Universe, or and Arya from Game of Thrones, and Gandalf might be in it.
It's kind of like when they first put Sonic into Smash Bros. Before that it was all Nintendo characters, and then suddenly it opens up a huge world of possibility.
Sonic and Snake, when they showed up in it, you were like, oh, there's lots of places they can go with this. They can get, They can get one of the Belmonts. They can get Mega Man. You know, you really wanted to see them bring in all those classic video game characters at that point.
But they still failed at bringing in Waluigi, so it doesn't matter. The only Nintendo character that really matters.
I mean, you gotta imagine they're saving him for the next Smash Brothers. They have to have some big announcement when they announce that one.
They gave us the year of Luigi. I want the era of Waluigi. I want the decade.
The dark era of Waluigi.
Waluigi at the Iron Throne.
Sony announced that the PlayStation VR 2 will release early 2023. I would assume this would be by the end of March. That'll be the first quarter of the year and everything. So when they say early 2023, I would assume sometime before March. They are going to have hands-on with it at the Tokyo Game Show, specifically the Resident Evil Village virtual reality version that they're putting out and everything. So, you know, people are going to be playing this very, very soon. Within the next month, they're going to actually get hands-on with this. It's coming, you know, the beginning of next year. We'll talk about a negative that has to do with all this with the next story. But right now, I don't know. Are you still hyped about this? I know, OJ, you particularly had expressed, you know, being pretty hyped for the VR2. Are you still holding on to that?
Yeah, I still am, and I'm really like, because the Oculus Quest 2 has you know, good graphics, is good gameplay, but like having the power of the PS5 behind it, I think is really, really going to be amazing, and I'm really, really looking forward to playing some of the more in-depth games like Resident Evil stuff, because I didn't get the VR one for PlayStation, but I'm really, really ready to get this and play it.
I did not get the VR one either. I did play it. The headset was incredibly comfortable. That was my big takeaway at the time, that it was like, of all the VR headsets that I've tried and played, it was the most comfortable to like put on and everything. So, you know, I know that sounds like a minor thing in the grand scheme of things, but I really do hope that they get that right with this. You know, because I think that actually does go a long way, particularly when you're talking about something like Resident Evil, a game that you're going to sit down and play for like 10 hours, versus a lot of the Quest material, which is play this for 10 minutes, you know, and I think they really need to nail that. But yeah, I mean, the specs and everything on it sound really impressive. It sounds like they're fixing all the problems that people really had with the first unit. So yeah, I'm excited to see what comes of this.
No, I think it's still wired, isn't it?
Yes, but it's just one wire this time. Okay. And there's no breakout box, so it's basically running a USB-C cable into your PlayStation 5.
Okay. So that's a little bit better, but I don't know. I would still prefer if there was a wireless version.
Yeah, I'm not sure why there isn't a wireless version, because the Oculus Quest, you can do that with the PC, connect it wirelessly, and that works remarkably well.
Yeah.
You know, that's how I use it most of the time at home. So I'm actually kind of surprised they're not going that route, because that does just make it a much easier, you know, thing, even just to set up, right?
Yeah.
Because you're just not having to worry about the cable and keep it from, you know, winding around somebody.
Yeah.
So.
Well, we have dogs too, and so there's a dog is just gonna. It's bad enough with the Quest when they walk in front of me and I can't see it. So let alone if they have a wire that they can grab on.
Yeah.
I can imagine my cats doing that. In fact, my cats did do that. I had one of the Vive units originally for the PC, and it was multiple cables. And as you can imagine, I'm standing in the middle of the room and cables are dangling from me, and the cats are standing there pawing at them while I'm trying to do stuff.
The cats are like, new toys for us.
Right. He's playing with us. I mean, look, he's dangling cables down for us. I can't blame them for not understanding that. The negative news is that Sony is increasing the price of the PlayStation 5. So,
I love that. Just love, you know, we can't even get one, but we're going to jack the price up again anyway.
Just to rub the salt in the wounds.
So Oculus actually just did this recently with the Quest 2. I think we talked about it here on the podcast. That price went up $100. In this case, they're raising the price basically everywhere in the world except the United States. So the United States price is actually not going up. Canada, Mexico, Europe, Asia, Australia, almost everywhere else in the world, they are increasing the price by as much as 20%.
Well, as long as it's not affecting us Americans. No, seriously, I think we need to lead a proletariat revolt against the Bolsheviks that are Sony and rescue Spider-Man from them in the process.
Yeah, I mean, what do you think about this? I guess I should add that both Microsoft and Nintendo have come out and said they are not increasing the prices of their systems. This is kind of surprising. Like, this is not something that happens with game consoles. I mean, I'm trying to think of the last time outside of the Oculus Quest, which is not a traditional game company, I guess. I'm trying to think the last time a game system has actually gone up in price. Sometimes they'll get a discount at Christmas, and you'll get like a $20 or $30 discount at Christmas time trying to sell more systems, but not at least for now, this is a permanent increase. Any thoughts?
No.
That's just crazy. Like I said, they've just had such supply and demand problems already with the PS5. I'm like, man, if I wanted to pay $1 million, I could go out on eBay,
Damn bourgeois. Sony.
Yeah, I mean, I think, Alicia, when you bring that up about people going on eBay and paying higher prices, you start to kind of see the logic from Sony's perspective. So if we're selling this currently at $500 and people are paying $600 for it on eBay, why are we letting them get the extra $100? Mm-hmm. Why don't we just sell it? Now, in Sony's defense, and I really feel bad defending Sony, but I guess let's give their defense, their side of the story.
Objection!
Yes, thank you, Phoenix. Their argument for this is, hey, there's all sorts of inflation in the world right now. There's all sorts of constraints on parts. That's part of the reason it's been difficult for people to get these. That's increased the cost of individual parts. So this is cost that's been passed along to us. We're just passing it along to the customer in the process.
Yeah.
I mean, you could just do like cuts to the wages of the big CEOs and use that money to help like fund stuff. I'm just saying, you're rich enough.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I don't think any of us are pro this.
I think we need the Kermit meme. That's none of my business.
I don't think I felt like this Marxist before. Like, they're not Sony's games; they are our games.
This is what finally turned you into a Marxist. Is the PlayStation 5 price increase? I see a shift in your dissertation all of a sudden.
See me like reading an issue, like reading a copy of like Capital by Karl Marx, and then like Rachmaninoff is playing in the background while I read it, like in my red tuxedo.
Got a hammer and sickle, like smashing his PlayStation. The games belong to the people. I think this is really, really fascinating. The not raising the price in the U.S. is also kind of really interesting because their argument is that the U.S. has a stronger dollar, and that's probably the reason why. But we also kind of know why. If they did it in the U.S., there would be a much bigger backlash online for this.
Yeah.
Americans would absolutely lose their minds.
Did you see how they responded when like they didn't give them their favorite sauce at McDonald's for the Rick and Morty fans? Do you know how they're going to respond now?
Can you imagine the campaign ads this fall? Joe Biden's the reason your PlayStation 5 costs $550.
Oh my God.
This ad was sponsored by Ryan, who is now a Marxist.
Vote for me, Dr. Oz. I'll bring.
Dr. Oz had an ad he put out on social media where he's in a grocery store and he's like just picking stuff up off and going, wow, this is $6. This is $8. This is way too expensive to afford. And like,
Biden's fault.
so can you imagine him in GameStop? Like, look at the price of this game.
What do you mean you're giving me 30 cents for this game?
Just imagine him like chaining himself around the GameStop. He's like, I'm doing this like they do to the trees. Like, that doesn't make any sense. Nobody's knocking down the GameStop, Dr. Oz. Like, this is against Joe Biden.
Oh, man.
That would be so weird to see the Republicans embrace gamer culture all of a sudden.
Oh, no.
Oh, man.
All right, some less silly news. GoldenEye 007 for the N64 turned 25 years old. I believe it was yesterday that this happened. So this is easily one of the most influential video games of all time. The game that most people, along with Halo, credit with popularizing first-person shooters on consoles. So happy birthday, GoldenEye 007. There is still supposed to be a remake of that coming out sometime that has been spotted on Xbox Live. Apparently is completely finished and is in an indefinite holding position, most likely due to the war in Ukraine. Because that game heavily features Russian imagery throughout it. So
I do hope that when they do release it, you can play Daniel Craig's James Bond.
that game
I don't know how Alicia felt about that, but
that game originally had multiple James Bonds in it, right?
I think
like
they
in the
did, but they cut it
multiplayer?
out.
Okay. Well, I know it had like different enemies, like it had Odd Job in it and Jaws, like some of
I
the
didn't know that.
yeah, in the multiplayer mode you could play different characters. And I think it had multiple James Bonds. Like I thought it had like Sean Connery's James Bond in it.
I thought I heard that they were going to, like, they had like code in it for it, but they didn't end up releasing that. Or that's what I thought I heard. I could be wrong.
That may be, I can't remember honestly offhand. I know it did have the Jaws and Odd Job because people would ban in multiplayer. You couldn't play Odd Job because Odd Job was short, and so he was actually harder to shoot.
Oh, yeah.
His hitbox was actually lower.
Did he throw the hat at people in the games?
I don't know that you could do. I don't think you could do that because I think it was just swapping out weapons and everything. He didn't have unique attacks. If they were making it today, absolutely, you would be able to throw the hat.
So regardless, I guarantee you, if you can't play Daniel Craig when the remake officially comes out, I'm sure there will be mods.
Just that. I actually watched his films over the summer. I'm not a big James Bond fan, but I loved his James Bond movies. Gonna go ahead and say it. I saw some of the Sean Connery ones. Not impressed compared to Daniel Craig. Daniel Craig owned that role. Just saying it right here. Sean Connery, bland next to Daniel Craig. Daniel Craig won. Way better James Bond.
If you are angry, you can contact Ryan. Ryan.freels@sau.edu.
That's actually not my email, so
If you're angry, send your comments to justin.young@sau.edu and he'll forward them to Ryan.
That's true. I absolutely will. Send me your angry emails to Ryan. Actually, I'd actually prefer that because it means that the rest of us will get to read them and laugh. And Ryan can't just like hide them and be like, nobody wrote me. What are you talking about? We'll read them live on the podcast next week. All right, THQ, part of Embracer, held their own show, their THQ showcase. I guess they're actually THQ Nordic now, which, they're not the original THQ. They're this amalgamation that has taken on that name now. And they showed off some new games. I'll read through these real quick. They're doing a new Alone in the Dark. If you don't know Alone in the Dark was It was Resident Evil before Resident Evil. It did like the look and the style and the gameplay, a little less actiony than Resident Evil, but did that a few years before Resident Evil did originally. And there's been a few different Alone in the Dark games over the years and everything. So it looked pretty interesting from the gameplay that they showed off. They showed off a new game called Recreation. This is coming from some of the ex-Criterion team that did the Burnout games. So they most recently did the game Dangerous Driving, which was very much a new Burnout. And so this game looks sort of like that, except there's all sorts of loops and corkscrews and everything in the tracks. But the really cool thing is you can place pieces onto the track in the middle of a race. So it looks like people will be able to alter the track in the middle of while you're racing it and put new elements down. So maybe it's a bit of, it's a bit of multiplayer where maybe some people are building the track while other people are racing on it and everything. It looks really kind of interesting. That team, certainly has some pedigree behind it. So that looks pretty interesting. They're doing a remake of Gothic, which is mostly a PC game, I believe, originally. They are doing a Jagged Alliance 3. Jagged Alliance was a sort of overhead strategy game where you're hiring mercenaries and going on missions and everything. I remember really liking Jagged Alliance on the PC back in the 90s. So the fact that they're doing a new one is pretty exciting and cool. We'll see how that actually turns out. They're doing an Outcast 2. And for Ryan, they're doing a new SpongeBob SquarePants game, the Cosmic Shake, which looks like a really weird game. It's SpongeBob, so that's understandable. But the footage that they showed was SpongeBob, and Patrick was basically a balloon that was following him around.
That was weird.
What?
Yeah.
So Ryan, excited for a new SpongeBob game?
Where did the assumption come I was a SpongeBob fan? I mean, you're actually right. I do like the original, earlier years, but I don't think that ever came up, so I was kind of surprised.
You are a fan of everything surrounding SpongeBob, so it felt like a very safe bet.
There's lies here. But, okay, so...
Invader Zim.
I actually don't like Invader Zim.
Oh, okay.
There's a story behind it. Anyway, I did look at this just because out of curiosity. The level design looks pretty. I kind of like the plastique look of it, how that kind of goes with, the cartooniness of it. It's fine. I'd rather just play, there's other platformers. If I'm playing a platformer, I'd rather play, I'd rather go back and play Kirby the Forgotten Land all the way through. Or I'd rather, go back and play through some older Mario games or Super Mario Odyssey and fill out some of the stuff. It's not that it looked bad. It didn't look like it did anything particularly interesting. And I'd just rather play, a Nintendo platformer, I guess is what I'm saying. Nothing bad, just it looked okay. And the one thing I really liked is that is his floating down gliding device. He uses a Krusty Krab pizza, which is a cute reference. And he even says the Krusty Krab pizza. I'm okay, that's a cute reference. I liked that, but otherwise, that's my review.
Yeah, I think you kind of hit the nail on the head that it looks very average.
Yeah.
It doesn't look bad, but it doesn't look fantastic. And when there are some fantastic platformers out there, mostly the Nintendo variety, it's really hard to play through one of these unless you're just a die-hard fan of the property, right? So, yeah, I completely get that. Are little kids still SpongeBob fans?
It's still a thing. I don't know how many. I imagine Nickelodeon's still putting out a lot of SpongeBob, unless Nickelodeon's really out of touch and doesn't know what to do, which I could kind of believe that. But I imagine I know my nephew still liked him for a while.
Okay.
We would watch some of the episodes of the older show sometimes together, but
So this is probably good for little kids. I mean, it'll probably be, what a lot of those licensed games always were that THQ was making, back when they were the original actual THQ, which is, this is a licensed game that you buy for your nephew because your nephew really likes video games and SpongeBob. And, when they're a little kid, they don't maybe have the best taste. Or most discerning taste, right? So like they'll be just as happy with this, and you can go. They would be happier with a Kirby game, but they won't know any better. And this game will go on sale, where the Kirby game will never go on sale.
Right.
That's it's Nintendo. OJ, I really liked the meme that you posted, like a week ago or so, where it was $60 the game or something.
Yep.
And it was like, it'll never go on sale. I never played the first one because it never went on sale. All right. So Gamescom had their sort of annual kickoff event. Gamescom is, for those who don't know, it's basically the German equivalent of E3. And it's a big trade show, except it's even much bigger than E3 because they allow in the public, and it's, on the European continent. So it brings in a whole lot more people, and there's actually public transportation in Europe. So people can come far and wide and try to go to this event. But over the last few years, they've been doing this opening night live event. This is hosted by Jeff Keighley, who does the Summer Games Fest and also the Game Awards. And it's become a big, all publishers come here and show off their new games and everything. Traditionally, there haven't been a whole lot of big announcements at this. Most of that's been done at the Game Awards or at E3 during the summer. Because E3 has been such a mess the last few years, this has become more prominent. So we actually do get some announcements now. So we're going to run through, these are just some of the highlights. They showed off the game everywhere. So this is from some of the former Grand Theft Auto developers, most specifically Leslie Benz works on this. It looks sort of like Fortnite, but with racing. But at the very end of the trailer, they showed some parts that looked hyper realistic. So most of the trailer looked very cartoonish and everything. So people are kind of wondering what this is going to actually be. Is this some sort of metaverse game? Is it something where you're playing a hyper-realistic world, but then playing games within that hyper-realistic world, and they'll have their own kind of style within it? I think probably the footage they showed off brought up more questions than it actually answered about the game. But it at least looked interesting, and it's got some very talented developers behind it. They showed off Dune Awakening, at least a little CG trailer for it. This is a new, massively multiplayer online survival game set in the Dune universe. Specifically, it looks like it's set within the movie universe of the most recent film that they did. They announced the DualSense Edge. OJ, I know this is what you've been holding out for. This is Sony's apparent answer to the Xbox Elite controller. The DualSense Edge is a basically professional controller for the PlayStation 5. It's going to have extra buttons and triggers on it. It's going to have where it looks like you can swap out the different controller control sticks and everything to get ones that fit more to your thumbs or your style of wanting to play them and everything. OJ, you've talked about wanting something like this. Are you going to buy a DualSense Edge?
Well, I want to see two things. One, to ensure that we can switch out the sticks, because we've gone through already 3 controllers where we had to just buy a new one because the sticks were all pointing up. All of them were pointing up. And so if we can switch those out, yes. And also the battery life on the PS5 controllers is kind of crappy. So if they have an extended battery life, I'll really be excited about that. So I'm gonna hold out a little bit and see just to make sure. But it would probably be a lot cheaper in the long run for us if we can switch out the sticks.
How much would you be willing to pay if it has those features?
Well, right now we spent $280 on PS5 controllers, so I would be willing to pay like $300 for it.
Wow.
If I can get a stick for relatively cheap to switch it out.
I will say I have the same problem with the Xbox controller, and I think I just play on the Xbox more than the PlayStation. I have had the problem with it on past consoles, not on the PS5 yet, but where the controller rubs raw eventually, and the rubber comes off it and everything, and it's not. I know you can replace it. You can take apart the controller and everything, but it's not an easy thing to do. Right. So something where I could just snap those out and replace those would be very enticing to me personally. Alicia, Ryan, any interest in Pro controllers? I know
I need
you don't
to be
have
able
a
to get a
PlayStation
PS5 first.
I'm still wanting to get a hammer and sickle to start wrecking some PS5s. I like my Pro controller for the Nintendo Switch. I don't care about what comes out for the PS5 right now because I'm mad. But I mean, I'm happy for OJ if you have a good controller for your PS5. Yours will be saved from the wreckage when I get my hammer and sickle.
No one will be spared from the revolution. They showed off some more footage of the Callisto Protocol. This is the new, outer space monster game and everything. So it was going down essentially like a water slide. It looked like the corridors were flooding and you were being dragged along with it through like a sewer or something. And while you were doing it, there were just things like jutting out of the sides, like blades and stuff that you were having to avoid as you were going down this. It looked really cool. It kind of reminded me, if you played the Tomb Raider reboot they did a few years ago, there were sections in that game where you were going down like a river and you were having to avoid logs and things. In that game, it was incredibly graphic because you would, like, if you didn't avoid the log, it would like just stick through your neck, up through your head and everything.
Damn.
Jeez.
If you have not played that original Tomb Raider reboot, that is one of the most graphic games you'll ever play, because whenever Lara dies in that, she dies in the most graphic way possible. And it was one of the things they fixed with the sequels is they backed off that majorly. And it's really, it doesn't fit with the game itself. It just feels really awkward and out of place.
That sounds like something for like a Resident Evil game.
Right, which this is more in tone with, like the Resident Evil games. I mean, this is essentially a spiritual successor to the Dead Space games.
Yeah.
And so they showed this, it looked cool. The tech looked cool. The water looked good and everything. How fun playing through that. Like playing through something like that to me is always fun until you fell it and you have to keep replaying it.
Yeah.
Let's see. They showed Moving Out 2. We played this at Playing for Pets, the original Moving Out. This was a game that our boss, all of our bosses, Sandy really liked quite a bit. I remember her asking me, "Is this available on Switch?" I think she might have went home and bought it for her daughter's Switch.
Aww.
But it's a game where you're moving furniture out of a house into a moving truck and everything. So they announced a new one of those. It looks a lot like the original, but look neat and everything. Those are fun couch co-op games to play together. They showed a new trailer for Hogwarts Legacy. This looks really dark.
Yeah.
And, like they were doing curses in it, right? And I don't know. I guess this is something personal for me, and I was kind of interested in what you all thought. I like the Harry Potter books, but like those books are a progression where they start off very like light and fantastical and progressively get darker to the end. But what made me fall in love with those books was the light and fantastical, and like I was okay that we got dark at the end because that made story sense and everything within that world. It feels like everything that they have done in the Harry Potter universe, in the wizarding world of Harry Potter, and let's get the official brand name right, has just been depressingly dark since then. Those like those Newt's those new
The
films.
Fantastic Beasts.
Yeah, those are so dark.
The first one was very fun, and then they've gotten progressively darker.
And I've heard progressively worse.
Yes.
Well, like the second film, they're killing babies.
Yeah.
It doesn't feel like fantastical fun movies anymore.
I just want to point out to everybody, I don't think killing babies is funny. It's just weird how that escalated.
No, I'm with you, Justin, though. Like, I was reading Harry Potter. I was in kindergarten when I started reading Harry Potter, because that's when it was coming out. And what I really fell in love with...
You're making me feel really old.
I'm sorry. But what I really fell in love with was the early fantastical, like, I was really looking forward to this game, just getting to, like, live my best Hogwarts life that I didn't get to live when I was 11.
Right.
And I don't know, I'm, like you said, there's times where it makes sense for it to be dark, but I don't love that this new trailer seems like it's starting you off right away, like, literally, I think the one character's like, I can either teach you Crucio or I can use it on you. And I'm like, hang on.
Right.
Is this supposed to be the hero?
Zack Snyder's Hogwarts Legacy.
Well, I think that is the problem, right? Like these latest two films, even some of the last films in the main series, right? They just got where there was nothing light in them. It was all dark.
Yeah.
And this game feels sort of the same way. And when people go to Universal Studios to go to the Harry Potter land, they're going because they want to be encompassed in that fantasticalness. They want the paintings that are moving and everything. They want to go into the wand shop, and they want to go to the candy shop where things are crazy and stuff. And it feels like that's the entire opposite message that the movies and the games are sending these days.
Yeah.
And I don't know who that's for. It's like they're making it for they're making it for Alicia as a grown-up who grew up reading the books instead of making it what these were originally, right, as children's books.
Yeah. And as the target audience, I will say, I'm sick of it. Bring it back to the light-hearted stuff.
The darkness doesn't weigh down on you as much if you haven't seen the light.
So I'm 1 month older or younger than Harry Potter. But as the books were coming out, I was essentially the same age. Well, give or take a little bit. They came out over an expanded area of time. But I think most of the stuff is made for people who have already been through all of the books when it got dark already. I always saw the first few books still as really, really dark too. Like going back and reading them, they were really dark, but I wasn't seeing them in a frame of it being really dark. So I appreciate a dark Harry Potter game myself.
I don't have many strong opinions on this personally. Like, I'm fine with it. Like, it could be cool. I also understand why, like, Alicia's like, I want the lighter, funner part. Like, and sorry, was I interrupting OJ? I was like, okay. And I'm in the camp, I think, that's just, like, burnt out on anything Harry Potter after, like, J.K. Rowling went turf. Although I could be convinced to play this game if you have a villain based on J.K. Rowling. And it's just J.K. Rowling, but she talks like the Swedish chef from Muppets, but she just keeps going, toughy, tough, 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 toughy, tough, tough, tough. And, if that happens...
Instead of J.K. Rowling, it's M.N. Bowling.
I just make a J.K. Rowling, but I know they wouldn't get away with that. But although I will say I like that, because they did do this with, like, the last Fantastic Beasts movie, I noticed in the advertisements, they did not bother saying, in the creative wizarding world made by J.K. Rowling. Nope, they did not bother with that name. They're just like, nope, nope.
Her personal brand is toxic at this point, and they want to avoid that as much as possible.
And she's not getting anything out of a lot of the newer stuff. I mean, even if money is coming her way, she's not getting. It's making no difference in her life. She's a billionaire. Like, we could stop everything, at all, JK, and she wouldn't care.
No.
That's it. I mean, I really haven't partook in anything since all of that came out, but I know that many people are, and there's the whole like death of the author type stuff. I think that goes along with that. And there are people that are working that will feel the difference if people aren't doing this, but J.K. Rowling won't.
Right. And
Yeah. That's kind of my thing, too, is like, I want to support the game devs. I want to support the team who actually did this.
Yeah. And I think I may have said this on here before, but because I know a lot of trans people who are going to be playing this game, they're waiting for it and they love it and they can put a separation there. But one thing that I would ask people to do is if you are going to give money for this game and buy it new, maybe give that amount or more to an organization that helps trans people and undoes some of the harm that people like J.K. Rowling do.
Right. And I also want to point out, when I'm saying I don't want to have much to do with Harry Potter anymore, I'm not dissing, like, especially like trans folks that needed Harry Potter when they got it and still love the universe as critical as they are at the author. I don't personally have that strong of attachment to Hogwarts or Harry Potter. So, like, when I dislike J.K. Rowling, it's not hard for me to just be like, I'm good, I'm done.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's completely understandable. I mean, I think everybody has to deal with it in their own way, right? And I think the one thing people should be careful of is shaming somebody for how they approach it and how they deal with it. Like, you can still be an ally to trans people and still engage with Harry Potter. And I think everybody has to kind of come to that choice on their own terms, yeah, I mean, the developers, again, we've talked about this before, and I've stated this, but I'll state it again. The developers have denounced Rowling's comments. They have said that they are going to make it possible in the game so that people can kind of choose their gender and do more than two genders and like kind of play around with that. So it seems like they are going very much out of their way to distinguish this separate from, the person who didn't even create this, but created the world that they're building it within. And certainly, right, lots of people who have created things have turned out to be horrible people. There are still people who go and, I'm still a fan of Buffy the Vampire Slayer, despite the fact that Joss Whedon is a horrible human being from every story you hear now. I think people just kind of have to approach that on their own terms.
I will say I said I'm not engaging with anything more Harry Potter, but when you remind me of that you can actually play, like, that they're getting more complicated with, like, the genders you can play, that might make me consider playing it, just because as a non-binary person, I kind of get tired of, do you want to be male or female? And I get really sick of that. So if they, if I were to have the option to, say, play non-binary or even just trans, I might then get it just to be supportive of that. Although I really want a non-binary option in the game. But also, Stanley Kubrick makes some of my favorite movies. If I was alone in a room with him, I'm sure it would end in a yelling match. So do what you have to with the work that was there when you needed it to be there. I know many trans and queer people needed Harry Potter when they got it. But also, do what you can to also be supportive of things, the supportive of the things that J.K. Rowling is so awfully against.
Right. We're running a little long, so I'm going to kind of hit some highlights here real quick so we can get kind of to the end of the show. We've had a lot to talk about this week, which is good. But Sonic Frontiers gets a release date, November 8th. We talked about this in a text chain and everything back and forth, but this is probably the best trailer they have released for this game yet.
The story trailer actually makes me excited. Like, before I was like, I'll probably play it. Now I'm like, I can't. I am so excited for this game.
Yeah, I think this is a much better tool at marketing the game than those early trailers, which really did not showcase what this game was.
The early trailers were so boring, and now this actually looks exciting.
Return to Monkey Island. The new Monkey Island game is being released September 19th, which happens to be International Talk Like a Pirate Day. So
I'm very excited.
That's some great marketing right there.
That's smart.
I am also super excited about this. If you've never played a Monkey Island game, I highly suggest get those remakes that they put out, the special editions, I think is what they call them, where they went back and redid the graphics and some of the input and everything. Go get those on the PC. They'll run on just about anything. They're usually a couple dollars through Steam. those are fantastic games to kind of get your feet wet. Or just wait for this one and play it. It'll probably be the most accessible they've made so far. They announced and showcased a new game called Life of P, which is Pinocchio meets Bloodborne, basically.
This looks awesome.
It's like a very dark take on Pinocchio, where Pinocchio is going around, slashing up people. This looks really like this was probably the best game they showed at this event. This looked really interesting. Ryan, you said you watched it?
Yeah, I don't know much about it. I'm not, like, I think steampunk stuff can be cool, but I was, like, kind of over it for a while. I hadn't seen any. I don't think I've ever seen a steampunk game that I looked at and I'm like, oh yeah, but this has like this does the steampunk aesthetic and it does it really cool. I really want to try this. I don't know much about it again, but I like the way they were like you have like the automaton arm on the one guy that looks kind of weird and cosmic-y, but also steampunk. I like the way the different like scary machines looked. They kind of even made me think of Elden Ring, like some of the monsters I saw in that. Right. But, more steampunky and techy and stuff, and I definitely want to give this a shot.
They showed off a new trailer for High on Life. This is the game Justin Roiland, the creator, or half of the creative team behind Rick and Morty, is working on this. You pick up weapons in this game, and the weapons are sentient creatures that talk to you. So the gun they keep showing has the voice of Morty from Rick and Morty. So it's just Morty basically talking to you throughout the entire game. This is the most obnoxious looking game I've ever seen. I enjoyed the first couple of seasons of Rick and Morty. This game just looks like it's going to wear thin really, really quickly. Mm-hmm. That's just my knee-jerk reaction to it. I could be completely wrong. I'm just trying to think of any game where somebody's constantly talking to you, like a companion or something.
Hey, listen. Hey, listen.
Yes.
Hey, listen.
But in a more annoying voice.
Yeah. And to me, a more annoying voice, definitely. and just the humor, right? Like, it's got that sort of Rick and Morty humor. I know one of the things they showcase is like you walk up to a child and the gun is going, oh man, we can't shoot a kid. Oh, we're going to end up with an M rating or adults only. Oh no, don't shoot that kid. Oh, I can't believe it. You shot the kid. Oh, this is horrible. What's wrong with this? And
I'm annoyed from that 5 seconds.
Yeah.
Again, like for a moment in a game, fine. But if this is going to be the entire game over, say, 10 hours, I just can't imagine this not just driving me nuts.
Yeah.
Maybe get a different voice actor. I'm sorry. I think Justin Roiland does the voices, right? The voice of Morty, right?
I think so.
I'm not necessarily against him doing voices, but I'm just gonna be honest. I think there are better voice actors whose voices that would wear thin on me, like much less quickly. I think there's cool ideas in this game. Like, I see cool little bits of world building, like with like their TV shows and radio stuff going on in the background, and like just some of the stuff you're seeing and hearing. But yeah, I could see the gun talking to me, wearing really thin, really quick, and also the eyes of the gun staring at me just started like creeping me out, and I was just like, I'm done. Yeah, nope. I don't want to keep being stared at by my gun. That's weird.
Yeah, I just think it will wear thin really quick. They showed a Killer Clowns from Outer Space game. This comes from the Friday the 13th developers who made the recent game where one person's playing Jason and one person is playing the counselors, or the rest of the players are playing the counselors. This is using the film Killer Clowns from Outer Space. It's a CG trailer. That was the coolest part of it, that somebody was making a game based on Killer Clowns from Outer Space. So we'll see how this turns out. But that Friday the 13th game was flawed, but it fundamentally was a pretty cool premise, and I could see how they could build a better game off of that. They also showed Dead Island 2, which we have not seen in quite a while. They showed off a brand new CG trailer and then some actual gameplay of it. It looks an awful lot like a Dead Island game, except it's set in Los Angeles this time. and not on an actual island, which is kind of interesting for the title. But anyways, kind of looks like an interesting new game. I think we'll go ahead and skip these last couple of stories. We can maybe do those next time. And get to the what you're playing section. So, Alicia, what have you been playing?
I've mostly still been playing Kirby Star Allies. I beat story mode, so now I'm working through, because you get to play as the different, the cutter and the ninja and all that, and play through the levels as them, bringing along allies from that as well. So I'm working my way through that right now. But that's really been all I've been playing lately.
Still enjoying it, I assume?
I am. It's still very fun. It's still very cute. Kirby just never gets old.
That's why he scares me.
He is immoral. All right, Ryan, what have you been playing?
So the main thing I've been playing lately is I've actually gone back and played, I got it for free with, Nintendo points that I've never bothered to check on. I'm like, oh, I can get, $10 worth of games. I went ahead and bought the original Doom. That game, I'm saying this as someone who'd never played it before.
The original Doom or original Quake?
Doom.
Okay.
I played Quake before.
Okay.
As someone who's never played the original Doom, that game still holds up. It's really, really good. I would be willing to call it probably, out of not a giant selection by any means, but, probably my second favorite shooting type game, after Resident Evil 4. Resident Evil 4 still being my favorite. And that's a big thing for a game that, was so big in kickstarting the genre that it still holds up that nicely, I think. I've played the first Quake a little bit. I've played the first Wolfenstein 3D because I was actually more interested in those games than I was Doom. I thought they just looked a little neater. Mm-hmm. I think I like the idea of, hunting down evil Nazis and Wolfenstein, and I just thought the monster design looked cooler in Quake when I saw pictures and stuff, and also the Trent Reznor Nine Inch Nails musical score. But I got really bored with Wolfenstein 3D pretty fast. I could see where it was a nice prototype, but it wasn't that interesting. And whereas Quake looked cool and had some cool music, but the gameplay it definitely felt clunky, and I definitely felt its age. Doom, the age is there, but they worked with the age. I like how the aiming system works. I was at first really confused. I can't move my target around. I just keep moving the character around. But you just want to move your character and face it in a way where things are within range of your target. And it will on its own shoot up or down wherever your enemy's located around the target, and it just changes color based on how well within range they are. I thought that was actually, I think that's still holds up as a brilliant design. It still plays nicely to me. It doesn't feel clunky. It still just almost feels like a choice, less than a clunky, this is what they had to do. And I know to some extent it was, but it still works. I like moving around the levels, and I like how the level design complicates over time, how at first it's just navigating around, fighting off enemies, then you got to get keys, and then they play with that. And at one time, there's a level where it's impossibly hard, because there's all these ridiculously big demons. And I'm I know sometimes I can get the demons to fight each other, but that can't work, can it? And then I just move around enough. I just keep moving around the place where the demons have to interact with each other. And I leave it to, the demons mostly killing off each other, so I just have to pick a few off at the end, and it ends up being what was impossibly hard ends up being really easy. I love this game. It's wild. I'm going to keep playing it. It's wild how this holds up. And I see why it holds up over Quake and Wolfenstein 3D. Wolfenstein 3D was kind of a bland, important prototype. This was the thing that kind of ignited it, that really ignited that genre and kickstarted it after that prototype. And Quake was, I think we talked about this, you were saying it was more of a tech show-off, and it doesn't hold up that well. So yeah, I'm a Doom fan now. The other thing is...
I think that's interesting, just real quick, that those two games, Wolfenstein and Quake, they say that don't hold up super well for you. They both basically were tech show-off pieces.
Yeah.
When you go back and you play them now, I don't think they hold up as well because they're not as innovative. They don't feel as innovative and revolutionary as they did when they originally came out. Whereas Doom, while still a tech showcase, felt like the evolution of Wolfenstein, and it was actually this interesting, good game built off of that original. And I would say Quake 2 and 3 are the same way with Quake 1 in that regard. So, but go ahead, Weird.
Yeah, no, it's just neat for me because I didn't play those games when I was a kid, and so I wasn't a part of that. But I was playing this like I see why above all of them, Doom is the one. It was the one that interested me the least. But after playing, I'm like, this is easily the best. I see why this is the one that people fell in love with and is still talked about today more than the others. I mean, obviously, Wolfenstein, they still make Wolfenstein games. Quake still had its folks that loved it, but not like Doom. I don't always like to be it's like, well, I liked it, this more strange avant-garde thing. But no, the popular one was the better one. And the other thing is I went back to playing AI, the Somnium Files 2, after taking a break. I still like this game. I don't think I like it as much as the first one. I think I talked about how it was doing some really cool things, but it was kind of almost getting overly ambitious, trying to do too much at once. And I think here's my thing about it. I think some of the highs in the gameplay are higher than in the first one, but the lows are also definitely lower. So something they have in this game that I haven't talked about as much is they do have scenes where you have to do like those like immediate action like button presses for the action scenes, which I don't always like. They make them intentionally really clunky in this game to make it more difficult and challenging, and making something clunky to make it challenging to me is a bad game design technique. And there was a point where it was so ridiculously clunky and hard to do just some random button presses. Not random, I mean they were timed, but they made it so poorly designed and clunky that I was ready to rage quit the game. Just like, I can't believe you guys just made this bad. Right. And the other thing is, as much as I've taken interest in the story of the characters, it's tried to do too much. And there's a wild twist at the end. And there's ways it's unimpressive. I don't want to say too much about it. This is a spoiler, but I'll go ahead and say it. So don't listen to me for the next 5 seconds, listeners, if you really want to play this or something. But there's a mystery in the game. Is like there's been these murders, and like you're getting half bodies like at one time, and then 6 years later you're getting the other half of the body. But it's if they just recently died, the way like the autopsy report shows. So like, how is it 6 years later you're getting the other half of somebody that was dead 6 years ago, but it's like they were just killed like an hour ago? And they're like, it's because your flowchart was off in the game. It's because we intentionally set the flowchart of the timeline to make it look that way. Actually, that 6 years apart thing hasn't been happening. And that to me just feels like a really badly done twist at the end. Like, we lied to you through the flowchart. The twist ending is the flowchart was wrong. I just like
it was all a dream.
Yeah.
It's just, and there's ideas that are cool in how they're doing it, but I just feel like they wanted to do some cool sci-fi twist, and they did not stick the landing. They fell on their face. Right. There's still interesting stuff going on in it. But this, I felt like could have been like within my top 10 games up with the original, and it is definitely not now. I can go into more about what's problematic, but I need to finish it first. But since we're, running short of time, I'll go ahead and stop there. But I'm disappointed with it right now.
All right. OJ.
So I bought Bayonetta 1 and 2 for the Switch to go back and replay them before Bayonetta 3 comes out. And I'm really enjoying it, but it's harder than I remember. I'm having a difficulty. Like, I remember that it took a lot of farming to get all of the currency to buy stuff. But it seems to be taking a lot longer than I remember, and like the fights are a lot more difficult than I remember. So that may be me getting older and not being able to play as well. But also, it may just be from moving from. I think I played it on the Xbox when I played it the first time, and then going to the Switch, and that might maybe being a little bit of difference in there. It is really awesome though, because you can use the screen, like the touch screen on the Switch, and do fighting and movement from there. I haven't done it yet because I've been playing it on the TV, but I think I'm going to try it out at some point and see maybe if it's a little bit easier that way. Because like, while I do want to go through and play, I don't want to have like a super hard like playthrough for like 1 and 2. Like for 3, it'll be fine, but for 1 and 2, I just want to play through them again for a little more nostalgia type stuff.
All right, is that it?
Yep.
Okay. Because school is getting back in session, I've been really busy. I haven't had a whole lot of time to play anything new. I played a little bit more Power Wash Simulator. That game just keeps going. I don't know how many levels are in that game, but every time I'm like, this is it. This is the final level. They have something new, and I'm like really impressed with the amount of content in that game. Like before, I was like, yeah, this might be good to, even if you don't have Game Pass with it free, like this might be worth the investment. Now I'm like, this is totally worth the investment. If you actually like this, like you will get your money's worth out of this game. Just the amount of time you can put into it. Let's see. I played a little bit more in Multiverses. I still like that game. I still have the issues that I've talked about before on here. I do think it's a little bit floaty compared to what I like, and which is more kind of, I think Smash Brothers has a more kind of a snappy like jump to it and everything. So that's not a deal killer by any stretch or anything, and it does give it its own sort of feel different from Smash Brothers, so that's not inherently bad or anything to it. Let's see, and I've been playing a little bit of Forza Horizon. 5, I guess is the newest one. I played some of this when it originally released. I keep coming back to it. It's just a fun driving game. It's not quite as arcade as I would like for it to be, but it's a lot more arcade than the normal Forza games. So, it's pretty easy for people to pick up and play. I'm not a big sim racing fan. That's not the style of games that I want to play. I want to play something super arcadey for the most part. And this at least scratches that itch. It's not Burnout Paradise, which to me is about the pinnacle of that sort of genre. But it's still very enjoyable, and it's a huge game with tons of content. And they're putting out new seasons of content. All that's included free with it. So I do strongly suggest people play that game if you think you might be into it. Big question for this week. Since we're starting back new school year, what game reminds you of starting college? So by this we mean, what's a game that when you think about it, it reminds you of, when you were an undergrad or starting undergrad, that first semester, that first year, or just those experiences living in the dorm or something? Is there a particular game that takes you back to those memories? Ryan, why don't we start with you?
It's not like I played these during starting college or anything, but just the main thing I could think of, because there's not many games I actually specifically think of about starting in relation to starting college. The main thing I could think of is like the Pokemon games, like Pokemon Red, Silver, and also like I played Pokemon Let's Go Eevee. Just because it's that idea of setting out on your own, going on an adventure. The idea, beating the gym leaders, is kind of like passing these tests. And then
beating your professors.
Yeah, as happens, and as actually happens in the universities, and then you become a Pokemon master, you get your diploma. That's it. It kind of, this is the closest thing to a feeling like that. I'm sure there's games that take place in universities that are more like that, but I haven't played them, and this is just kind of what makes me think of that.
Sure, I think that makes a lot of sense. Alicia.
So for me, this one, I didn't actually have any current gaming systems when I started college. We had stuff back at home, but I didn't bring any of it with me to college. Mm-hmm. But for me, I think the big one was a PS3 beat-em-up game called Saint Seiya Brave Soldiers. So Saint Seiya is a manga series that is popular everywhere in the world except the US, which I am salty about, but it was a really fun game. I would go home for the weekends, and sit there and play it with my sister. And one of the things I really loved is it follows the manga all the way through, whereas the anime adaptation of Saint Seiya makes some changes and adds some things, some of which I'm fine with, some of which I'm not. But so getting to play this game, and especially as you unlock more characters, all the characters have different relationships with each other. And so my sister and I would just set up the computer versus computer battles to get all the different dialogue options and cry because we hate seeing the brothers fighting each other. But so that for me, I think is the one. We were both on a really big Saint Seiya kick when I started college. And so that was the one that we played the most, I think, when I came home for those weekends. So that's the one I think of.
I have never heard of Saint Seiya.
So basically what it is every 250 odd years, Athena is reborn as a human being. And she and her warriors fight against the other gods to protect humanity. So her warriors are saints, and there's gold saints, silver saints, and bronze saints. Each of them have armors and powers associated with different constellations. So the gold saints are the 12 zodiac signs, Aries, Taurus, Cancer, all of that. And then silver and bronze saints are different constellations. I'm not sure if Kuramata had a reason for what was silver and what was bronze, but so you go through the first arc and you're fighting against the gold saints because you have to prove that this is the real Athena. And then you have the next arc against Poseidon, and then the next arc against Hades. So
it's basically Pokemon meets Castlevania. All right, OJ, how about you?
So less than a game, more of a simulator, but Second Life, I had a business in Second Life when I started college and made a little bit of money off of it. So I always think about Second Life when I think about starting college, my first year.
Second Life, for those who don't know, was like the metaverse before the metaverse was a popular term. Yeah, it was kind of like a popular online chat room in a lot of ways, but people did all sorts of different things with it.
Yeah, it's a really, really big simulator type thing. People can make items in it, run businesses. I made real money off of it for people. Cool. I won't tell you what I ran, but I had a business.
All right. He will tell you off air if you if you ask him.
Just play our alternate reality game, and
there's actually a few. I think I've mentioned some before, games I played in college a lot. One of the ones that I go back to and talk about a lot is Worms Armageddon. And in college, we played a whole lot of that game, sitting around in the dorm room together. And the games, playing a game of that can take hours when you have multiple people playing. And, and it was just fun. You'd sit around and just give each other crap over it, because if you throw the grenade and it bounces back and hits you, that's the greatest thing in the world for everyone else playing the game, to just mock you endlessly. So, that game is one of those that I can put on, along with some of the sort of N64 wrestling games. A lot of those kind of remind me. We played a lot of those because when we liked wrestling at the time, wrestling was kind of cool at the time with the whole NWO stuff going on. But it was also, those were also just really fun games to play. They were simple to pick up and play. Anyone could play them at that time, not like modern wrestling games, which are generally trash. So, all right, that does it for this week. We will be back next week with a new episode. Now that we're in a regular schedule and everything, we're hoping to put out new episodes weekly and everything. We will be auditioning new women to take the place of Alicia.
Hang on, that doesn't solve the one-woman problem.
Fine, we'll replace OJ. Are you happy?
No, I do want to say I didn't mean to come up. I was using that as an example because you guys are so welcoming and wonderful. And also, this is still something I'm aware of. But honest to goodness, I love all three of you. You're phenomenal.
And we're just teasing Alicia.
Yeah,
we're
nobody
not.
was
Oh,
upset.
yeah. No, I know. But I just wanted to be clear. I wasn't saying I felt any sexism in this environment.
Well, we appreciate that. But, we hope you also will call us out if we ever are.
Right.
If you want to call us out on anything like bad opinions about Sean Connery,
or asking about butthole cuts,
or if you found any update controller simulators that I can play,
you can send those emailed to me at justin.young@siu.edu, and I will pass those along to everyone else, including Ryan, the hate mail if you have any, but we will definitely read it on the next episode before we allow him to destroy it. And you can check out all of our past episodes by subscribing to us on whatever podcast feed you prefer to use, whether that's Apple Podcasts, Google Play, Spotify. You can also check out our website, salukigames.com. That has that as well as additional content on there. And if you are interested in, being on the podcast at some point or something, get in touch with us. We're always looking for people. Sometimes one of us has to be off for a week or something. So we always like having guests. We like having women as guests. And contrary to what some people say, we do have other women as guests sometimes. We just need
sorry, I forgot you, Jody.
But, we're always happy to have people, reach out and everything. So please do so. And again, I'd like to thank Alicia, Ryan, and OJ for joining me this week. Everyone else, have a great week, and we'll be back soon.